My name is Kavengi Kitonga. I do research in AI, particularly in healthcare and also in regulation. There's so many explanations definitions as to what AI is, but I like to look at it simply as a process in which computer systems are made intelligible so that tasks that would ordinarily be done by human beings are delegated to computer systems. I don't think so. Well, the context depends, because in certain, for example, in a domain such as healthcare, given limited personnel, there are a lot of tasks that can be delegated to bring about more efficiency within the sector. So it's just context dependent, the purpose as to what AI is being used for. In my opinion, is what would determine our concern for it, just like any other technology. In the past as well, only that now it's become more prominent, with the introduction of technologies such as ChatGPT, but it's always been in the background. It's just that now it's coming to the foreground and it's omnipresent in different things that we use, from our search engines to different applications that we use. So it's becoming part and parcel in ways that would not have fathomed in the past. Yeah, so for example, in certain circumstances, you might find, for example, I spoke of recruitment, for example. You might find that normally what would happen is that an advert is sent out for applications and thousands of participants apply depending on the domain. So ordinarily what would happen is that human beings would have to come through every application to screen participants and shortlist. So you find that in certain domains, such jobs have been delegated to AI-powered tools to perform initial screening, and then at an advanced stage, then you can have, human beings now come and screen the lists further to now determine who gets into the interview room. A different application, because I like AI applications in healthcare, would be, for example, artificial intelligence, computer-aided detection, so that now the integration of AI tools in, for example, tuberculosis detection. So what would happen ordinarily is that you'd have a chest scan, and then you have a radiologist who inspects that to determine, are there any abnormalities indicative of a disease? So given the fact that we don't have that many personnel, a limited healthcare workforce is something that so many African countries contend with. So the introduction of such tools has the potential to transform the sector in the sense that a radiologist can be relieved, of the task of detection, not fully, but at least there's assistance to it because the workforce is not able to meet that demand. So you see, that's it's just specific to the tool that we're talking about, and it's actually an important discussion that is within the circles to say that because the implementation of these tools is not without cost, even if they are coming in to help, and depending on what sort of task the tool is doing. So there's that discussion. And it's an important discussion, especially in healthcare, because if, for example, you would have to use an AI-powered tool to perform some of these detection tasks, but then the tool would need updates, the tool would need certain improvements, what happens if you're dealing with a healthcare system that is already resource constrained? So it's a pertinent question, and it will depend on what is being introduced. And it's something that is ongoing because you wouldn't want further health inequities to be propagated. You wouldn't want them to be already their health inequities, but you wouldn't want that to be propagated further if, for example, a certain institution can afford to update their tools while another institution cannot afford to do that, simply because there are costs that have not been factored in the continuous deployment of these systems. It's important because as a company that is in Africa, Qhala is to us being shapers of our own destiny. So what that actually means, and it reminds me of, the mission of deep learning in Daba, where we say that it's not traditionally, a lot of times technologies have been introduced in Africa in the context that we are recipients of those technologies. And yet, as a recipient, you don't have a voice as to how this fits to your context. And there are contextualities that only you know, because you live on the ground. And so that has been a trend in previous technologies released, but now we have AI here, which is something that things can be different in the sense that if these technologies are being introduced here to solve our own problems, then it's important that we are able to not just receive, but to also determine the direction, to design technologies that suit our context, that represent our culture, and also that address our pressing challenges, which we know best as we are centered here. I think because at this point in time I'm biased. I don't know whether that's a good thing. Bias is good, right? For me, because my research is right now primarily in healthcare, I just see so much that could be achieved, especially within the context of the fact that, for many of our SDGs, we're not at the point where by 2030 we would have achieved what we want to do. So if you can have a technology, or you can have a solution for that matter, AI or otherwise, that can help to accelerate that trend, that would be very important, especially in the context of healthcare. COVID disrupted a lot of milestones in other disease domains. So just to come back on track, and right now we're in 2024, to be able to meet 2030 targets, even not to meet, but at least make an accelerated advancement, I think that its application in healthcare, given the numerous bottlenecks in the healthcare system and also with disease, would be very important. So just to give a brief overview, is that, in the past year, there was a lot of regulation. There was significant regulation in other countries, like the US, China, India. Powerhouses in that, if we can say that. And so I think that sometimes, because Africa, so many times we've been left behind, and also given what AI sometimes may evoke, there's perhaps also that feeling that, should we also jump onto this bandwagon, Are we missing on something important if we don't emphasize regulation? And basically, the paper set forth the argument to just say that regulation in itself is not a bad thing. And eventually, it will be necessary, as it is even in these other countries. But given the fact that AI is in its early phase of development, at this point in time, AI regulation is not a priority, given other things that would need to be addressed, like challenges within the ecosystem. So the position is just to say that regulation is important, regulation is necessary, but also to highlight that even within other places where regulation is taking place, in places where AI is advanced, there is also debate. So much more, how much more for us here, in which the AI ecosystem is just in its infancy. And the argument is just that before we can speak of regulation, there are other pertinent challenges that we must address so that Africa can rise to the occasion. I think you can look at it from different perspectives. The first would be just infrastructure. For example, electricity and broadband internet connectivity, there are quite a number of countries in Africa in which the percentage of the population connected to electricity is less than 50%. And the same thing when we talk about broadband connectivity, the percentage is even much less. And you have, significant, which is exacerbated by a digital divide. Now, aside from just the basic infrastructure, another critical important component is our data sets. A lot of these AI models are trained on data that is not representative of us, yeah? So the question is, the priority is, we need to create our own data systems upon which we can train these models so that we're able to have solutions that speak to us. And in other cases, the data doesn't exist. For example, if you want to create like chatbots, for so many languages in Africa, they're not documented digitally, It's passed by through oral tradition. So those are some of the priorities, and included after that would be just the talent to develop these systems, the talent to utilize these systems. So these are some of the important priorities you have: infrastructure, data, the talent, and also the awareness within the market and compute resources, because training some of these models is so intensive and we need access to compute resources. African researchers need access to compute resources to advance to a scale that, can I say, to be considered formidable? Those are some of our priorities right now before we can speak of regulation. I think a common misconception is that it's new or it's just come out of the woods. Yeah? It's always been around, but it's just that now the interface brings it much closer to the user, But it's been around since the 1950s. It's just that now with the advent of applications such as ChatGPT, with generative AI, it comes to the forefront. But it's not that it's new in that sense. Yeah, I think that for me is one of the leading misconceptions about what it is. That it's this new thing that came out of the woods. I think just highlighting the important ways that it could actually be a tool for good, Because even as I read, I discover so many ways in which so many challenges, especially within the healthcare system, from the moment you step into a clinic, you're queuing, the fact that some people are located in a remote place, you just get to see the different ways in which AI can address these challenges, and you can see how literally it can make an impact, in people's daily lives, in terms of improving their outcomes, in terms of health, saving lives, helping people in places where there's no health system present, health personnel. So you can literally see how for quite a number of our challenges, it can be a useful tool. And not just useful in the sense that, it can help, but it can save lives. It can, there's quite a lot to it. I think it depends on, for example, if you're planning to, to delve into this space, then of course it would be important to get an education on it. But aside from people who are involved in the development of these systems, for every other young African, because it's becoming omnipresent, and there are different tools that are being developed that can actually make our work easier. So I would actually, advocate for the embracement of these tools, embracement of these technologies, because it reminds me of economic terms, it frees up your time, the opportunity, because some tasks can be mechanized, and therefore you're able to actually focus on the things that tap into your passion. So it's an embracement of tools, because these tools are omnipresent. Whether you're a doctor, whether you're doing your own current work, these are tools that can actually help you free up space to do things that require you to exert your expertise. So not to shy away, in short. Yeah, so I think I personally don't, feel that fear that AI will come and take over people's jobs. I look at it from a point of a tool, well, when applied to its proper sense, can help free you up for your creativity. But I think then, the onus is on enhancing people's capabilities, so that regardless of what you're doing, you're able to leverage on these tools. That way, your skill set is devoted to opportunities to create, So for me, I don't look at it as a point that is coming to take away anybody's job. I think that, provided the tool the context is applied in an ethical way, it's actually, what can I say? Give a compliment to your work. I just feel that sometimes the fear happens if we're not embracing technology, or technology, the literacy around the tool. So that's what brings about the fear. It's everywhere. In fact, I think the only reason, it's everywhere, and it's always been in the background. You just get to know it now because of certain tools that make you really acknowledge that this is AI. But it's literally everywhere. So even when you claim that you'll divorce yourself from it, that's based on your assumption that you actually think that whatever it is you're using is not running on AI on the low. Can I put it like that?
Yeah.
And as we become an increasingly digitized world, there's so many things, there's so many ways in which AI infiltrates that we're not even cognizant of. Yeah. We don't need to be, you don't need to be an AI researcher, but there's so much that you can learn about its application and scope that is available to each one of us. It's not difficult, it's available to each one of us, and each one of us can leverage on AI within whatever work we're doing, and look at it and embrace it as a tool. Yes.
Thank you.